how did we come here? How early are we, and what kind of your understanding of the state of Bitcoin treasury that we are currently in?
Yeah, so I actually had Bitcoin treasury for some of our family businesses dating back to 2018. So got into Bitcoin 2016, orange pilled my dad and other family members sufficiently by 2018 so that we could take some of the family business and use a Bitcoin treasury. But at the time, it was very difficult. If you don't have an avid and somewhat technical Bitcoiner in your life to help you with that, basically your own Bitcoin strategy officer, then it's really hard to execute on that in a way that is secure, responsible, in a risk managed way that doesn't risk the operating business. So Mason Carter, my co-founder at Acropolis and principal at Early Riders, he started Acropolis middle of last year with, like I said, the mission of simplifying and scaling Bitcoin corporate treasury adoption. And so we've been at it since then. And yeah, the reason why Bitcoin makes sense as a modern treasury reserve asset is because everything else, all the traditional treasury assets, fail to keep pace with inflation. So if you're living amongst inflationary times, your real rate of return is not keeping up with the stated CPI. And so there's all these other properties that Bitcoin represents on the balance sheet, things like its 24/7 global liquidity, the fact that any holder who's held for 4 years or more is in the profit, the fact that there's no CEO, no marketing team, no product roadmap. There's not going to be any scandals because the Bitcoin CEO got caught up in something. And companies themselves have this regulation where they can't hold up to 40% of their balance sheet in securities, or they'll be deemed an investment fund. And so even things like the IBIT spot Bitcoin ETF doesn't make sense for a company. They're going to have to learn how to hold spot Bitcoin if they ever want to hold more than 40% of their balance sheet.
That's an interesting insight. I didn't knew that you cannot hold more than 40% of securities. So, but you can hold 100% of your treasury in Bitcoin if you hold them in self custody.
That's right. Yeah, because Bitcoin is a commodity. You can hold as much of it as you want, and you can even go past 100% if you're somebody like Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy and you want to lever up.
Absolutely. I want to come to MicroStrategy a little bit later because it's just so fascinating. I remember those times when I was like, oh, they were like 100,000 Bitcoin. And I was like, will they ever get to 1% of the supply? So like 210,000. And now we're over 500,000. And it's not that long ago that we talked about that. Like literally they started just 2020. So that's not even, I think, not even 5 years in. It's really fast how they did it. But first, I want to talk about maybe related to that. Why not more companies do that? MicroStrategy has been around for almost 5 years now. They have done it really good in the public eye. Then there are multiple companies that kind of followed suit that are also doing really great. Then, of course, there are like private companies, as you said, and as you've done in the private sector that have made that strategy also already beforehand. So there are examples and playbooks, and also the regulatory framework seems to be more and more favorable now. Why aren't more companies doing that now?
Yeah, all the regulatory hurdles are out of the way now. Things like the FASB rule changing, where you can treat Bitcoin at fair value on your balance sheet. That's huge. That was only as of January 1st this year. So that was a deal breaker for most corporations to want to get into the space. But the reason that we can look at Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy, or Semler Scientific and some of these other companies, is ultimately that they didn't have to do the consensus building in the same way that a typical corporation does. Michael Saylor is still a founder-led, he's leading a founder-led company at Strategy. He's majority shareholder. So if he's sufficiently an orange-pilled in his own life, he can pull the company in whatever direction he wants. Now, obviously, there's some level of investor relations and corporate communication and stakeholder engagement to get everybody aligned on the strategy so that you're not scaring folks out of your stock or running highly talented employees out of your business. So you do want to communicate the plan. But to some degree, Michael Saylor could have executed on this without anybody else's input or approval. And the reason that we don't see more public companies doing that is simply there's not that many other public companies that are still founder-led, majority shareholder owned. Usually when you're a public company, the shareholder base is become distributed enough that the founder is more operating the business on behalf of shareholders and has to deal with a board of directors of 7-9 people that they need to kind of have sign off on anything that would be this kind of new from a strategy standpoint. So we see a lot more success with middle-sized, large private companies where the CEO is still basically the dictator within that organization, and they're orange-pilled in their own lives, have Bitcoin on their personal balance sheet. And those are the folks that can really take the decisive action and move the company into a Bitcoin treasury strategy in a matter of just weeks.
Yeah, it's super interesting with MicroStrategy, and there aren't that many big companies that are founder-led. I always look at Facebook as an interesting example. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg could be someone that is into Bitcoin and not be super vocal about it. He made some tweet, I think, and not tweet, Facebook post in 2021 around his goats that he calls Maxi and Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So he definitely has, there's no way he does not have Bitcoin. And he could, I think, from the shareholder perspective, probably move Facebook in that direction. I don't know how exactly it looks. Is that your best guess of what company will actually first adopt a real Bitcoin strategy? Or is there some other company that you look at? I mean, there's Tesla, obviously, with 10,000 Bitcoin. But I don't know if that's a real Bitcoin strategy. It's probably the amount is not high enough for it to count in my eyes. I mean, 10,000 Bitcoin is a lot of Bitcoin, but not for Tesla.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people in the Bitcoin space look at Mark Zuckerberg and Meta as perhaps the next to follow suit. And it's specifically because of what I mentioned, where it's still a founder-led company and majority shareholder owned. Because, for example, you have Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, who's publicly stated that he owns Bitcoin and believes in its long-term potential. But Tim Cook does not have the majority shareholder or founder-led ethos to kind of lead the company in that strategy. So we don't hear many people talking about Apple, even though they have the most cash on their balance sheet out of, I think, any company in the world. So do I think Mark Zuckerberg will be the next to do it? I actually don't. I think that you're going to see more things like MicroStrategy and GameStop and companies that have essentially stalled out on growth and are hesitant to invest in new product lines, new markets, because they have cash on hand, they have a decent treasury, but they don't necessarily believe that the next product line they're going to create is going to generate the return on that investment that they would like, and definitely not one that would at least keep pace with Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate. So, and Michael Saylor says this a lot, basically the companies and the individuals that find Bitcoin are the ones that are in the need to know. It's the companies who need a second chapter. They need a new way to fuel enterprise growth. Those are the companies that start looking for solutions to a problem. It's the Mag 7 that they're doing just fine. They're doing well with the strategy that's in place. They can kind of just keep operating on their existing roadmaps, not deviate from course too much, and they're doing quite well in the public markets. So they don't need it.
It's so interesting because they have such a huge pile of cash. It would be so easy for them to really accelerate. I mean, I guess they might just trigger some real. I just have in my head, what if Apple really comes out on an earnings call? Yes, we will deploy 5% of our balance sheet into Bitcoin, which would be so huge because 5% of the balance sheet is just like such a huge amount of cash. That ripple effect that all of a sudden everyone will ask the Alphabet board members, oh, like, what are you doing? Then all of a sudden Meta and Amazon and all those it seems like the the big seven, or like even we can even say the big 50 or whatever companies that are in those pellets, if like one solid one is really going after something, and announcing it in a real manner of like, oh, we have 5% of balance sheet now from now on into the future, always in Bitcoin, or let's say 10% or something like that. That would be that would be huge.
Yeah, and we saw GameStop, which, is nothing compared to the balance sheet of an Apple or these other Mag 7, but the companies that are announcing Bitcoin treasuries are getting bigger and bigger. And they're getting more conviction around the percentage to allocate too, right? It's not just a 1 to 2% allocation. These companies are basically looking to treat their entire treasury as Bitcoin being their new hurdle rate for the incremental dollar that they would invest in a new line of business.
How do you look at actually GameStop? It's such an amazing story, a dying company that got saved by some meme kind of, and now maybe gets a second life, a huge second life of Bitcoin.
It's funny. It's in a way it was the short sellers who gave it life, right? Because they shorted the company so much that there became this opportunity for the retail crowd to kind of use that levered position against them and revitalize the stock. So, yeah, it's an interesting story. I'm not a holder of GameStop because, personally, I think MicroStrategy kind of has the runaway network effects, and they're going to have greater volatility. And I just don't think any other company is ever going to catch the number of Bitcoin that MicroStrategy holds. But it's still yet to be seen. We actually haven't seen GameStop announce their first buy yet. And I think it's kind of funny because I think a lot of the shareholders were hoping that they were in market buying during this recent dip. But now we're back up to 93, 94K. So it'll be interesting to see if Ryan Cohen and the team executed on the Bitcoin purchase, or if they were still trying to get their ducks in a line. Because that's the other thing. The larger the company you are, the longer it takes, the more boxes you have to check with compliance and communicating the strategy beforehand. And a public company has to communicate that they're going to go out and buy Bitcoin. And by the time that they go out to buy Bitcoin, the price might have run away. They might have signaled to the market. Like if you said, like what you said with Apple, signaling that they're going to go buy 5% of their balance sheet into Bitcoin. The second they make that announcement, the price might be up 50%, and then it might take them 2 months before they can actually deploy capital. And so the price has been running away from them for 2 months when they finally actually start to put money into their Bitcoin position. So there's a real disadvantage in some ways to the public companies. If you're not going to issue stock to buy Bitcoin, if you're not going to tap the capital markets and you're just going to purely take the cash on your balance sheet to buy Bitcoin, there's almost an advantage to the private company who can do this quietly and accumulate a stack and then announce it after the fact.
So Apple, and I have no clue about the rules for publicly traded companies. Apple's would have to announce that they will going to do that before they can actually do that. So they cannot buy 5% of the balance sheet of Bitcoin and then announce, hey, we bought 5% of the balance sheet of Bitcoin.
It's a good question. Like, do they technically have to signal that strategy change? I think so. But even if they didn't, they would feel the need to communicate the plan to shareholders, because what they don't want is to surprise shareholders. That's maybe one of the reasons that these companies like the Mag 7, which are basically treated like savings accounts for, people's retirement income at this point, what they're really trying to do is not surprise the market, because they understand that they're being treated as the piggy bank for, basically every retail investor, pension fund, etc. So their goal is not to shock the market, because they don't want the volatility in the share price that MicroStrategy is purposefully manifesting.
It's so sad. It's so sad because the stocks are now treated as savings vehicles, which shouldn't be there. And because
Crazy.
of that dynamic, now companies have to make decisions to not rock the boat. But as a business, you have to rock your own boat to be a business also in the future, not just now, because businesses are always evolving and there's always something new coming. And if you're not adopting a new strategy, you will be left behind. That's I never never looked at it that way, of the company also having to look out for their shareholders, because they treat it as a savings vehicle, and they might be not okay with a 10% drop, even though it's a great strategy for the long run.
Yeah, it is sad, and it's also really kind of a commentary on the quality of the savings technologies that we have in the market pre-Bitcoin, that we were treating companies as savings accounts, treating public company equities as if they can never go down. And then when you do see down days, you see the entire American voting public basically begging Washington, D.C. to bail out or change course on tariff talks to make sure that their 5 or 4% dip in their savings account, which are public equities, that those can recover, because they really treat people are investing in the S&P 500 today as if it can only go up, and that's very scary in a world where Bitcoin, automation, and AI can disrupt these companies that are also at really, really outrageous price to earnings multiples. I think Nvidia at sometimes hits like 200 years worth of annual revenue as their valuation. So you'd have to hope that that company can maintain that level of revenue for 200 years to pull in the value of its market cap. That seems unlikely.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.